Giggity, 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 giggity. Ooh.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I present to you the most disgusting, most depraved, most criminally active man in all of animated television. A man who makes prison inmates look like choir boys. A man whose search history alone could crash the FBI's servers. His name? Glenn Quagmire. Now, I know what you're thinking. He's a cartoon. Relax. But what if he wasn't? What if every single thing this man has done on Family Guy actually had real legal consequences? Well, I was stupid enough to binge the entire series to find out. And let me save you the suspense. This man's rap sheet is longer than a CVS receipt. We're going from parking tickets all the way up to crimes so horrifying they're the sole reason Family Guy will never, ever air before 10 p.m. Court is now in session. Giggity. Starting off with something that should surprise absolutely nobody, our boy Glenn has a habit of knowingly passing around every disease known to man. They don't call him Captain Syphilis as a joke. This man is basically a walking biohazard. Hepatitis C? Already got it. Meningitis? He's a carrier. Gonorrhea? Patient zero. The guy's literally run through a list of every known disease, and Quagmire just shrugs every single one off. He couldn't care less about the people he's infecting. Under the law, intentionally exposing someone to a communicable disease can land you 3 months behind bars. Honestly, that feels way too soft. You're telling me this guy could pass along something life-threatening and only sit in a cell for a few weeks? Ridiculous. But that's what the books say, so 3 months it is. Now, everybody knows Quagmire's not exactly winning any beauty contests. So it's no surprise he regularly pays for company. And I don't mean dinner dates. The man has so many appointments, he literally hired Chris Griffin as a scheduling assistant. Chris is out here booking follow-ups, sending thank you baskets, and managing a fishbowl full of panties like it's a legit front desk operation. How is this kid ever going to put this on a resume? In Rhode Island, paying for those kinds of services is classified as procurement, and it carries a 1-year sentence per offense. Now, here's where the math gets scary. Quagmire once threw a massive celebration for reaching 1,000 partners. He literally had a wall chart organized by country. Brazil, Italy, Thailand, and some of those Thai entries looked suspiciously young, by the way. If we estimate conservatively that 75% of those 1,000 were paid encounters, that's 750 separate charges. 750 years in prison just for this alone, and it gets better. There's an episode where the airline pilots go on strike and Quagmire needs cash. He stumbles into a bachelorette party, gets mistaken for a stripper, and suddenly he's got a whole new career at the local club. You gotta admit, for a guy in his 60s, he's got moves. Must be all that cardio. But the stripping gig doesn't last. He quickly upgrades to something far more lucrative, selling himself directly to clients. Women are actually lining up to pay Quagmire for his time. I honestly can't wrap my head around that one. He services 11 women in that episode alone. The penalty for each offense is 6 months, which means that's 5.5 years right there. And let's not forget, every single one of those clients probably left with a complimentary STD. All that activity has consequences beyond just jail time, by the way. Quagmire has fathered hundreds of kids and wants absolutely nothing to do with any of them. Every time a child shows up at his door calling him daddy, this man looks like he's seen a ghost. But there was one kid who was born actually normal, a daughter named Courtney. When they finally reconnect, Glenn tries to make up for lost time by bringing her to work. Sweet gesture, right? Except his job is flying commercial aircraft full of hundreds of passengers. He lets Courtney sit in the cockpit mid-flight and even encourages her to take the controls. His co-pilots egg her on too until Glenn suddenly plays the responsible parent card and calls them perverts. That might be the most ironic moment in television history. Letting an untrained civilian operate a commercial plane is a massive violation of aviation law, 1 year in prison, and a $500 fine. Honestly seems cheap when you consider hundreds of lives were at stake. Speaking of things that are cheap, you'd expect Quagmire to pull something inappropriate with Lois, his lifelong obsession. But no, the one time he decides to flash someone, it's a random delivery woman just trying to do her job. She shows up with a package, and Glenn answers the door with a package of his own. The poor woman looked absolutely horrified, and poor Chris has to grow up on a street sandwiched between two complete degenerates. In Rhode Island, intentionally exposing yourself in a way that causes someone distress is classified as indecent exposure. That's another year in prison. Now, Meg Griffin actually catches a break for once. Peter gets declared unfit as a parent, and she gets to have a sleepover at Cleveland's house. Things are going great until a certain neighbor shows up uninvited, crashes the party, and makes everything uncomfortable. Knowing Peter, he'd probably let Quagmire waltz right in. But Cleveland? No way. Glenn definitely broke in on his own. And this wasn't a one-time thing either. We've seen him sneak into the Griffin house to spy on people in the shower. Trespassing alone gets him 1 year. The peeping? That's a whole separate charge I'll get to shortly. But at least Meg has 12 months of Quagmire-free slumber parties ahead of her. Too bad someone else will probably ruin it anyway. Then there's the property damage. The Griffins are enjoying an air show, and naturally, Quagmire is the star pilot. Everything's going smoothly until Glenn spots something on the ground that grabs his attention, and he deliberately nosedives through 4 billboards. The man literally cannot go 5 minutes without his brain short-circuiting. Destroying property like that is criminal damage. 1 year behind bars plus a fine worth 3 times the damage. I'd estimate that bill comes to about $10,000. Looks like Glenn's gonna have to cut back on his subscription services for a while. And if you thought the peeping was limited to that one shower incident, oh no. Spying on women is practically Quagmire's defining character trait. We see him lurking outside bathroom doors, pressuring people to hurry up so he can watch, and at one point, he's literally hiding with a camera trying to film Meg using the toilet. Why is Peter still friends with this man? Peeping on someone for your own gratification is voyeurism, 1 year per offense for the regular spying. But the camera footage? That bumps it up to video voyeurism, which carries a 3-year sentence. Between those clips, Glenn's looking at another 5 years minimum. Now here's where things get weird, and by weird, I mean Quagmire shows up on a completely different show. When Glenn pops up on American Dad, he's naturally up to no good. Francine thinks she might be pregnant, despite Stan having a vasectomy. She takes an online pregnancy test from a so-called doctor, Vagers, that requires her to photograph her body and do bizarre things with a teddy bear. Stan gets suspicious, but the test results never come because the good doctor has already moved on to his next victim. That doctor is, of course, Glenn Quagmire, who has 0 medical qualifications. Impersonating a licensed professional is straight-up fraud, 3 years in prison. And the fact that Francine kind of resembles Quagmire's dad, Ida, makes the whole thing about 10 times creepier. All right, here's one of the rare moments where Quagmire's criminal behavior actually comes from a good place. Bonnie just had a baby, and Joe is drowning in a $20,000 hospital bill. I know the Europeans watching this are in absolute shock right now. The guys ask Lois's billionaire father, Carter Pewterschmidt, for help, but Carter basically laughs in their faces. Of course I could, but it's funnier if I don't. So Peter hatches a plan to rob the old man. The heist itself is absolutely chaotic. Quagmire has to cut through a combination lock using, and I quote, Reese Witherspoon's chin. They almost get to the cash, but Joe's conscience kicks in at the last second. Bonnie does eventually get the money, though Lois threatens Carter with a divorce lawyer. But Quagmire's role in the attempted heist still counts as burglary, 5 years. He could try blaming Peter and Cleveland, but honestly, they were all equally guilty. Things take a darker turn from here. Brian Griffin already takes enough abuse from his own family. But when Quagmire finds out Brian slept with his father, who recently transitioned and goes by Ida Glenn, completely loses it. The backstory. Quagmire's dad, Lieutenant Commander Dan Quagmire, comes out as transgender. The guys crack jokes at first, and things get awkward at a Navy ball where every compliment about Dan turns into an unintentional innuendo. His fellow sailors talk about stroking privates, cleaning butts, and having the best penis in the military, and they mean all of it, literally. Dan transitions, becomes Ida, meets Brian at a bar, and they hook up without Brian knowing who she is. When Glenn discovers this, he beats Brian into the ground for what feels like an eternity. And somehow, even after getting completely destroyed, Brian still manages to get the last word in. Assault charges for this kind of beating would land Quagmire 5 years. Animal cruelty charges could stack on top of that. But here's where I'm only halfway through this video, and Quagmire's already racked up nearly 800 years. And if you think it can't get worse than beating a dog senseless, just wait. When Peter discovers his birth certificate reads Justin Peter Griffin, he embraces a whole new cool guy persona and throws a massive house party. A bunch of teenage girls show up, and one of them leaves with Quagmire. She doesn't drive, she rides the school bus. She's in high school. The cops show up, confirm what happened, and arrest Glenn on the spot for statutory rape. In Rhode Island, if the victim is between 14 and 16, you're looking at a 5-year sentence. But the show's judge gives him 20 years. Finally, some real consequences, except not really, because Quagmire's ultra-religious mother gets him off the hook by sleeping with the judge. Twice. And just like that, Glenn walks free. And this is exactly why Quagmire will never get his own spin-off show. Then there's the time Chris sets up a hidden camera to prove there's an evil monkey in his closet. The footage reveals way more than he bargained for, including Quagmire casually punching the kid in the face in the middle of the night. Was it a prank gone wrong? Does Quagmire just dislike Chris? Either way, a grown man giving a 3-year-old a black eye is a very serious offense. That's child abuse, 10 years in prison. And honestly, the scariest thing on that footage wasn't even Quagmire. It was Herbert painting Chris in his sleep. That entire street needs a restraining order. Now we're entering the territory that makes this video hard to narrate with a straight face. It turns out Quagmire is so obsessed with his addictions that he actually resorts to sleeping with the dead. And no, I don't mean zombies or people dressed as zombies. I'm talking actual corpses. In the Cleveland show, Loretta, Cleveland's ex-wife, dies in a freak accident caused by Peter. Quagmire volunteers to transport the body to Stool Bend. When Cleveland asks why she's dressed in a French maid outfit, Glenn casually admits he wanted to be with a dead French maid. Giggity giggity. Seth MacFarlane himself called Quagmire an appalling human being, and moments like this prove exactly why. Necrophilia is punishable by 10 years. And good luck making any friends in prison when everyone finds out what you're in for. And if you thought that was rock bottom, it wasn't. Quagmire once married a giraffe. Full ceremony. I'm glad we waited, he says at the altar. And that union actually produced offspring, a baby giraffe with Quagmire's signature jawline. While a human-giraffe hybrid might fascinate some scientist somewhere, the courts would classify this as zoophilia, 20 years in prison. I doubt any of his hundreds of children, human or otherwise, would be visiting during that stretch. Now, let's rewind a bit to the Quahog Harvest Festival Parade. The Spooner Street Gang builds a float, and it reminds Peter of that time they stole free cable. Their scheme involved jumping the cable installer, which Quagmire enthusiastically participated in. $112 a month for Cinemax does seem steep for the early 2000s, but that's no excuse for violence. Assault carries up to 20 years. 20 years without cable television. Now, that's a punishment. Then there's the whole marriage disaster. Quagmire meets Joan, Peter's maid, and falls head over heels instantly. For a brief, beautiful moment, Glenn becomes a genuinely decent person, rejecting strip clubs, respecting women, the whole transformation. But at the wedding reception, champagne spills on Lois, and Quagmire's old instincts come roaring back. He wants a divorce immediately, but Joan turns out to be dangerously possessive. If you ever left me, I'd cut you. To escape, he fakes his own death with the guy's help. The plan? Get buried alive, dig himself out later. Problem. Mayor West orders all graves sealed in concrete because he's terrified of zombies. Things spiral. Death himself shows up to collect a soul. Joan accidentally touches Death and dies instead. And before her body is even cold, Quagmire asks Death to leave it there for 5 more minutes. Faking your death is tricky to prosecute in Rhode Island, but I'd estimate around 10 years, plus another 10 for the necrophilia. That's 20 years total for this disaster of a marriage. Throughout the entire series, Quagmire harasses practically every female character he comes across. Bonnie, Lois, random teenagers, even literal supernatural entities. He hits on a 16-year-old and asks if she's 18 yet. He makes creepy comments about Bonnie breastfeeding. He strings along a woman named Patty with zero genuine interest. He's so relentless that even the ghost girl from The Ring is terrified of him. When a demon finds you creepy, you know something's fundamentally broken inside you. Each count of harassment carries 5 years across those clips alone. That's 30 years, and we can only hope there are no female prison wardens at the Quahog City Jail. Now, you might have forgotten that Quagmire has a sister, probably because she was blessed with a normal jawline. Brenda shows up with her abusive boyfriend Jeff, while Glenn recovers from, well, autoerotically asphyxiating himself while watching clown porn. But Quagmire doesn't need medical help to recover, just Brenda singing him a heartfelt song. After Glenn is discharged, Jeff and Brenda stay the night. Nobody in the neighborhood can sleep thanks to Jeff's violent outbursts. The next morning, Brenda has a black eye and reveals she's pregnant. Quagmire is terrified. Jeff will eventually kill her and the baby. Peter suggests they just beat the guy up, but Quagmire wants to go further. We kill the bastard. And Joe the cop? Just sitting right there, letting his friends plot a murder on his watch. If being bad at your job were a person, it would be Joe Swanson. The guys invite Jeff on a hunting trip to finish him off, but Peter accidentally spills the plan. Jeff grabs a gun, is about to kill Quagmire, but Glenn talks the egotistical tough guy into fighting with fists instead. Jeff wins the fight easily and starts digging a grave. But Quagmire gets back up. I choke myself every day, you bastard. Glenn strangles Jeff to death. Joe writes a fake letter to Brenda, pretending Jeff just ran away. Who knew getting away with murder could be so easy? If Quagmire had been caught and put on trial, the best-case scenario is parole after 25 years. Worst case, life in prison. And even though Jeff absolutely had it coming, I'm not sure any judge would give Glenn a reduced sentence for it. Now, it's heavily implied throughout Family Guy that Quagmire is a serial kidnapper, and the evidence is disturbing. First, he drugs and abducts Brooke, one of Brian's love interests, right in front of everyone. Then we discover his house is fitted with booby traps specifically designed to stop women from escaping. We literally hear a woman screaming, "Let me out of here," from somewhere inside the walls. And in one chilling throwaway line, Glenn casually mentions that there's a girl tied up in his basement who needs to be fed. That's at least 3 confirmed kidnappings. Each carries 30 years. Total, 90 years in jail. And that's probably a fraction of the real number. Things get even messier when the guys try to save Mort's pharmacy from going under. Their rescue plan somehow results in massacring a bus full of teenagers. When that clearly doesn't work, they pivot to plan B, burn the store down, and collect the insurance money. Joe, who apparently has zero problem with Quagmire kidnapping women or literally murdering Jeff, suddenly draws the line at insurance fraud and arrests everyone on the spot. This man really needs to sort out his priorities. The math here is brutal. Manslaughter for roughly 40 victims at 30 years each, plus arson and insurance fraud. That's approximately 1,240 years. At least Peter and Mort will be in there to keep him company. Let's also talk about the fact that Quagmire is a confirmed registered sex offender, Exhibit A. The episode Admission Impossible reveals he's registered under Megan's Law, a federal law preventing convicted offenders from being near children. He's legally obligated to disclose this to anyone nearby. Exhibit B. His vacation cabin has hidden cameras that activate when guests undress. The Griffins found this out the hard way. Exhibit C. He once stumbled upon a tied-up junior high cheerleader in a bathroom, and his reaction was, "Dear Diary Jackpot." And Exhibit D. He lent Meg a massive, half-empty bag of roofies, the street name for flunitrazepam, a drug notorious for date assault. If we conservatively estimate he's used those pills on around 50 women, at 10 years per offense, that's 500 years. Despite having a stable, well-paying career as a pilot, Quagmire also profits from trafficking women. During Peter's redneck phase, we see Glenn chasing down escaped victims from his pickup truck, basically screaming, "Come back, I already paid for you." And those aren't the only instances. Human trafficking is a severe felony, 50 years per count, plus a $40,000 fine. Across roughly 11 victims shown on screen, that's 550 years and $440,000 in fines. And finally, the most shocking entry on this entire list. Quagmire travels all the way to Springfield, sleeps with Marge Simpson, and when Homer walks in on them, Glenn doesn't run. He doesn't say giggity. He pulls out a gun and kills the entire Simpson family. Homer, Marge, and after a long, disturbing pause, baby Maggie. Fun fact, this scene was actually Family Guy retaliating after The Simpsons put Peter Griffin on a wanted poster for plagiarism. Fox banned the scene for being too dark, which infuriated Seth MacFarlane, who thought the network was playing favorites. But regardless of the behind-the-scenes drama, murder in Rhode Island carries 25 years per victim. 5 victims equals 125 years. The image of those 3 kids will haunt this man forever. If he had a conscience, that is. So let's add it all up. Every STD, every prostitute, every kidnapping, every assault, every act of fraud, every harassment charge, every dead body he violated, every life he took, Glenn Quagmire's total prison sentence comes to 3,413 years. Not exactly worthy of a giggity. Think that's bad? Wait until you see how the other characters stack up. Click the video on screen to find out which Family Guy psychopath tops Quagmire's sentence. Giggity goo, I'll see you there.